The storm broke with a fury that felt personal, as if the heavens themselves were weeping over the mud-caked, unpaved road. Fat drops of rain, cold and heavy, hammered down, turning the path to Roni's school into a treacherous river of slush and jagged stones. He clutched his old, tattered school bag tighter, the thin cotton offering no defense against the downpour. But it wasn't the rain that was his biggest problem. It was the sole of his sandal, flapping loose like a wounded wing. With every step, the torn rubber slapped against his foot, a cruel mockery of the protection it was meant to provide. He tried to walk on the side of the road, where the grass was softer, but the mud was too deep. A sharp, stinging pain shot through his left foot. He stumbled, his heart sinking, and looked down. The sole was gone. Just gone. The last remaining thread had finally surrendered, leaving him with a worthless strip of rubber strapped around his ankle. He stood in the pouring rain, a 12-year-old boy in a world that felt too large and too unforgiving, one foot now completely bare. He could feel the cold, slimy earth between his toes, the insidious touch of a world that didn't care. Look at that. The champion is walking home in style. A cruel voice sneered from behind. It was Raju, the neighborhood bully, standing under protective awning of a closed shop. He and his friend were dry, their school bags new, their shoes clean. Roni's face burned with humiliation. He didn't respond, just started walking again. Faster this time, his bare foot slapping against the ground, the small, sharp stones digging into his skin. He felt the cold, hard lump of glass cut his heel, a deep, immediate pain. He bit his lip, refusing to let the tears fall, refusing to give them the satisfaction. He rounded the corner, ducked into a narrow, deserted alleyway, and finally let the tears come. He slumped against a damp brick wall, the rain still lashing down, and buried his face in his hands. The pain in his feet was nothing compared to the pain in his heart. It was the crushing weight of his mother's struggles, the endless cycle of poverty, all encapsulated in one lost shoe sole. He just wanted to disappear. "Excuse me, are you okay?" a gentle, unfamiliar voice asked. Ronnie looked up, startled. Standing over him was an older man, maybe in his late 50s, with kind eyes and a face etched with a certain weary sadness. He held a large black umbrella, shielding Ronnie from the worst of the rain. His clothes were simple, but they looked expensive, a quiet elegance that spoke of a different world. He wasn't dressed like a shopkeeper or a neighbor. He was a stranger. "You're hurt," the man said, kneeling slightly to get a better look at Roni's bare, bleeding foot. "What happened to your sandals?" Ronnie swallowed, the lump in his throat too big for words. They broke," he managed, his voice a raw whisper. The man didn't press. He just sat on the ground beside him, unfurling a handkerchief and carefully wrapping it around the boy's wound. "It's a long walk to school," he said softly, his tone full of a strange, knowing understanding. Ronnie, for a moment, forgot his embarrassment and spoke from his heart. "It is," he admitted, "but it's worth it. My teacher says I'm the best in the class." He paused, looking at his muddy, torn clothes and a handkerchief now stained with his blood. "I walked to school barefoot," he admitted, the words escaping him without thought. The man's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of something Ronnie couldn't place. It wasn't pity. It was something else. A profound sadness, maybe, but also a deep respect. He didn't say anything for a long moment. He just looked at Roni's face, a face too young to hold such weariness, and then at his own pristine, leather shoes. "I could buy you a new pair," he offered, but Ronnie shook his head immediately. "My mother wouldn't want that. We don't take charity." His stubborn pride was his last offense. The man smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "I understand," he said. He handed Ronnie a small, elegant business card. "My name is Elias. I own a small business. If you ever change your mind about the shoes, call me." Ronnie took the card, a piece of art in itself, and watched the man walk away, disappearing into a gray curtain of rain. The next morning, Ronnie found a small, folded note under a stone on his doorstep. It was from Mr. Elias. The note explained that his mother had given him a phone number and that he'd like to meet them. Mr. Elias, it turned out, had used his vast network to track down the boy. He had learned Roni's name from a quick, discreet call to the school. He hadn't just walked away and forgotten. He had found him. A few days later, he stood at their doorstep. Roni's mother, a woman with a face that had known hardship but still held a formidable dignity, was initially wary. "We don't need charity," she said, a line Ronnie had heard 100 times. "Please, ma'am, it's not charity," Mr. Elias said, his tone respectful. "It's a business proposition." He explained his idea. He wasn't looking to simply give Ronnie shoes. He was looking for a partner. "I need a perspective, a viewpoint I've lost," he said, looking at Ronnie. "I want you to tell me what a child's shoe should be, what it needs to survive a walk to school." He offered to pay Ronnie for his time, not as a handout, but as a consultant. The idea was so unconventional, so respectful of their pride, that Ronnie's mother, after a long, scrutinizing look, finally relented. And so it began. Ronnie would go to Mr. Elias's office, a place of hushed opulence that felt like another planet. Instead of factory tour, Mr. Elias would give him drawing pads and colored pencils. "Show me," he'd say. "Show me the perfect shoe." Ronnie, at first shy, slowly began to sketch. He drew a shoe with a rubberized toe cap, not just for protection, but for kicking a football in a field full of rocks. He drew a sole with deep, intricate grooves, like the tire of a tractor, to grip the slick mud. He drew a simple Velcro strap that wouldn't fray or tear. He talked about the feel of the material, about how it should be light enough to run in, but strong enough to withstand a broken road. He talked about the colors, bright and joyful, to make the children feel happy. Mr. Elias listened, mesmerized. This was not a child asking for a handout. This was a visionary, a designer forged in the crucible of necessity. He saw that Ronnie's designs were not just functional. They were filled with empathy and imagination. He wasn't just sketching a shoe. He was sketching a better childhood. The 4th month was a blur of prototypes and discussions. One afternoon, Mr. Elias sat Ronnie down in his grand office, a deep-set sigh escaping his lips. "Ronnie," he said, "I've been thinking. Your designs, they're brilliant. They're what this company needs. You've given me an idea that is so simple, so profound, I'm ashamed I didn't think of it myself." He leaned forward, his eyes bright with a renewed purpose Ronnie had never seen before. "We're going to launch a new line. We're calling it the Ronnie Collection." Ronnie's jaw dropped. "A collection? Named after him?" Mr. Elias simply smiled. "It's the least I can do. You've given me back my purpose." He told Ronnie there would be a big launch event, a press conference. Ronnie, overwhelmed, could only nod. He knew something big was happening, but he had no idea of the scale. He had no idea of the man's true identity. The day of the press conference dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the stormy day they had first met. Ronnie, dressed in a sharp new suit, felt like an imposter in a dream. The room was a blinding sea of flashing cameras and a cacophony of voices. Reporters were shouting questions at Mr. Elias, a man who had now transformed into the CEO of Symphony Shoes. Ronnie finally learned the name of the company he was now a part of. He was just a small part of a big show, he thought, a human interest story to sell shoes. He was standing on a stage next to Mr. Elias, who was radiating a new energy, a quiet power. A sharp-witted journalist, her eyes narrowed, called out, "Mr. Elias, why this sudden foray into children's shoes? Is this just a marketing gimmick to boost sales?" The room fell silent. Mr. Elias held up his hand, a small, knowing smile on his face. "A very fair question," he said. "And to answer it, I want to show you all something." He nodded to a technician, and a large screen behind him came to life. It was a video. The video was grainy, a bit shaky, film on a phone. The sound was muffled by rain. But Ronnie's voice, raw and filled with desperate pain, was unmistakable. "I walked to school barefoot," he admitted. The video ended, leaving a stunned silence. Mr. Elias looked at the sea of faces, his own eyes glistening with emotion. "That is Ronnie," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "And that is my inspiration. He is the reason we are here today. He is the heart and soul of the Ronnie Collection." The room erupted in a mix of gasps and applause. The journalist, a veteran of the game, looked at the boy and then back at the man, a dawning realization on her face. She raised her hand again. "Mr. Elias," she said, her voice now a mix of awe and disbelief. "Did you just say Symphony Shoes? Are you Elias Khan, the founder of Symphony Shoes?" The question hung in the air, a final, dramatic reveal. Ronnie's world spun. The kind stranger who gave him a handkerchief was the man whose company's posters he had seen on every corner, the man whose face was on billboards, the CEO of the biggest shoe brand in the country. He felt no anger, only a profound sense of awe. He had not known. All this time, he had been sketching shoes with a billionaire. The cameras turned to Mr. Elias, and he nodded, a simple, graceful admission. "Yes, that's me." The applause was deafening this time. But Mr. Elias held up his hand again, and the room grew quiet. He put a hand on Ronnie's shoulder and pulled him close. "This is not about me," he said. "It's about Ronnie. It's about every child who has to walk a difficult path. And that's why this is more than just a shoe line." He looked at the cameras, his gaze steady and determined. "From every pair of Ronnie Collection shoes sold, a substantial portion of the profits will be donated to the Barefoot to School Foundation, which we are establishing today. The goal is simple, to ensure no child in this country has to walk barefoot to school ever again." The press conference was no longer a press conference. It was a movement. Mr. Elias then turned to Ronnie, a soft, fatherly pride in his eyes. "And Ronnie," he said, his voice low enough only for Ronnie to hear, "I want to personally offer you a full scholarship. Any university, any field. It's on us. This is not charity. It's a thank you for teaching me what it means to truly walk in someone else's shoes." Ronnie's eyes filled with tears, not of pain this time, but a boundless, overwhelming hope. He looked at the man who had changed his life, the stranger who was no longer a stranger, and in that moment, he understood that their journey had just begun. It was a friendship forged in the crucible of a lost soul, a partnership built on a shared vision. He was no longer a barefoot boy. He was a boy with a purpose, with a future, and with a friend who had seen his worth not in his possessions, but in his spirit. He finally took a step forward, his feet, for the first time in a long time, feeling secure. The weight of the world lifted, and the path ahead, though still long, felt bright. The applause was a roaring wave that carried Ronnie and Mr. Elias off the stage and into the chaotic whirlwind of the world. Reporters, their faces alight with an almost ravenous curiosity, swarmed them, their microphones shoved forward like spears. "Ronnie, how did you feel when you learned who he was?" "Mr. Elias, is this just a way to capitalize on a feel-good story?" The questions came from all sides, a deafening blur of sound and light. Ronnie felt a dizzying terror, a deep-seated desire to flee, to return to the quiet, predictable life where his biggest worry was the state of his sandals. But a firm, steady hand rested on his shoulder, Mr. Elias's. "We said all we have to say for now," he announced calmly, his voice cutting through the noise. "The story isn't over. It's just beginning. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a very important appointment." He led Ronnie away from the clamoring crowd, a human shield protecting the boy from the onslaught of his new reality. They slipped out a back door, got into a sleek black car, and drove away, leaving the media frenzy behind. The drive back to Ronnie's neighborhood was a silent one. Ronnie stared out the window, watching the familiar streets and buildings, which now felt foreign and strange. The car pulled up to his house, and they stepped out to find the entire street gathered. Neighbors, who had once been indifferent, now stared with a mix of awe, curiosity, and a hint of envy. Raju, the boy who had once mocked him for his bare feet, was standing at the edge of the crowd, his face pale and his usual sneer replaced by a look of bewildered respect. Ronnie's mother, her eyes wide and teary, rushed forward and hugged him fiercely. She then turned to Mr. Elias, her pride and gratitude a visible force. "You did this to my son," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Mr. Elias simply smiled. "Your son did this for himself, ma'am. I just held the door open." The next few weeks were a surreal blur. The Ronnie collection launched, selling out its first run almost instantly. Every day, people would gather outside their small home, some offering congratulations, others begging for a handout, a job, anything. Ronnie and his mother felt trapped, their small bubble of peace shattered by their newfound fame. It was during this chaos that Mr. Elias had an idea. He helped them move, not to a mansion, but to a quiet apartment in a modest neighborhood, a place where Ronnie could simply be Ronnie again, with a space to study and live without constant scrutiny. Life finally settled into a new rhythm. Ronnie excelled in school, his grades soaring with a newfound confidence. He continued to meet with Mr. Elias, now not just as a consultant, but as a protege. They would talk for hours about design, business, and life. Ronnie learned about the intricacies of supply chains and marketing. Mr. Elias, in turn, learned about the simple joys and hardships of a life far removed from his corporate world. Their friendship deepened, built on a foundation of mutual respect. But their success wasn't going unnoticed. Just as the Ronnie collection was about to launch its second, larger phase, the attacks began. A small, anonymous article appeared in a business tabloid, questioning the authenticity of the Barefoot Boy story. A clever marketing ploy, it called it, designed to manipulate public emotion. Then, a rival brand, Titan Footwear, openly started a smear campaign. They claimed the shoes were made with cheap materials and were not as durable as promised. They ran ads showing their own footwear being tested, while subtly implying Symphony shoes was built on a lie. The media turned on them. The same reporters who had lauded Ronnie's story now questioned its truth. Sales began to slow, and doubt spread like a disease. Ronnie, seeing the stress on Mr. Elias's face, felt a knot of guilt form in his stomach. This was all his fault. He had brought this trouble to the kind man who had helped him. "I'll go to the press," Ronnie told Mr. Elias one afternoon. "I'll tell them it's all true." But Mr. Elias shook his head. "They've already made up their minds. We don't need to talk. We need to act." He had a plan, a bold, simple, and very public plan. Instead of a press conference, he organized an event in the heart of Ronnie's old neighborhood. They would hold the first shoe distribution for the Barefoot to School Foundation there, and they would do it in a way no one could ever question again. The day of the event was a blistering hot Saturday. A large stage had been set up in the town square. Hundreds of people gathered, not just the media, but the local community. On the stage, a team of engineers and material scientists stood ready. Mr. Elias, with Ronnie by his side, stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice ringing with authority, "there have been a lot of questions about the truth behind our story and the quality of our shoes. We decided to let the shoes speak for themselves." On the screen behind him, a live stream began. It showed the Ronnie collection, shoes being put through a series of brutal, real-world tests. They were dragged through mud, scraped over broken glass, and stomped on by heavy machinery. They showed no sign of wear. The crowd watched, mesmerized. Then Mr. Elias turned to Ronnie, his eyes full of pride. "And as for the story," he said, handing the microphone to the boy, Ronnie, no longer the terrified child in the press conference, took the microphone, his hand steady. He looked out at the faces, at the crowd for his old life. He saw his mother, her face shining. He saw Raju, standing in the back, his head bowed. "My name is Ronnie," he said, his voice clear and resonant. "And my story is true. And I know it's true because it's not just my story. It's the story of every child who has to walk a long, difficult road to get an education." He then gestured to a truck that had just pulled up, filled to the brim with boxes of brand-new Ronnie collection shoes. The crowd erupted in a spontaneous cheer. The first phase of the Barefoot to School Foundation was not just a promise. It was a reality. And it was happening right there, in the very place where the story had begun. Years passed. The Ronnie collection became a massive success, the Barefoot to School Foundation and national movement. Ronnie, now a young man in his late teens, was his first year at university, studying business and design, just as Mr. Elias had promised. One day, he found himself walking down a familiar road, a road now paved and clean, a stark contrast to the mud-caked path he once knew. He was no longer walking to school, but to the local foundation office. He wore a pair of the shoes he had designed, their durability a silent testament to his past and his present. He passed a boy, a little younger than he was, walking with his head down, his shoes so worn they were little more than rags on his feet. The boy reminded Ronnie of himself all those years ago. He felt a familiar pang of recognition, a deep sense of connection to a life he hadn't fully left behind. He stopped the boy, pulling a brand-new pair of Ronnie collection shoes from his bag, a pair he always carried with him for just such a moment. "Here," he said, a simple, warm smile on his face. "These are for you." The boy looked up, his eyes wide with surprise, and a question Ronnie knew all too well. Ronnie simply smiled and said, "It's a long walk to school, but it's worth it." He continued on his way, walking a path he had helped to pave, his heart full, the journey from barefoot to benefactor complete, a new chapter beginning with every step. The shoes found their way to countless feet, and with each pair, a new story began. One of them belonged to a young girl named Maya, whose family lived in a remote, flood-prone village. Before the foundation, her walk to school was a perilous, painful journey through muddy paths and submerged fields. She often missed school during the monsoons, the risk of foot injury too great. The new, sturdy Ronnie collection shoes gave her more than protection. They gave her consistency. With every step, she felt a newfound confidence, a sense of security that had always been out of her reach. She became one of the top students in her class, her dreams of becoming a teacher now within her grasp, a future built not just on her own hard work, but on the simple kindness of a boy she had never met. Maya's story was just one of thousands, a testament to the silent, powerful ripple effect of a promise kept. Years turned into a decade. The Barefoot to School Foundation had grown from a local initiative into a nationwide movement, a beacon of hope for children in every corner of the country. To celebrate the Foundation's 10th anniversary, a grand gala was held. It was a formal, glittering affair, a far cry from the muddy alleyway where the story had begun. At the center of the event was Ronnie, now a confident young man in his 20s, a graduate of a prestigious university, and the public face of a global enterprise. He stood on the stage, the same stage where he had once trembled in front of reporters, and looked out at a sea of dignitaries, donors, and journalists. Mr. Elias, now grayer and a little slower, watched from a front-row seat, a smile of immense pride on his face. 10 years ago, Ronnie began, his voice calm and clear, a stranger gave me a handkerchief and a business card. That day, I was just a boy with a broken sandal and a bleeding foot. Today, because of his kindness, we are a foundation that has given millions of children a chance to walk their own path. We've proven that the value of a shoe isn't in its brand name, but in the path it helps to forge. The crowd erupted in applause, but Ronnie held up his hand. "But this is not just a look back. It's a look forward," he said. He unveiled a new design, a sleek, minimalist shoe made from recycled plastic and sustainable materials. We've learned that a walk to school is about more than just a child's journey. It's about a future for our planet as well. So, in collaboration with my mentor, Mr. Elias, we are launching the Ronnie Collection, Legacy Series, a commitment to a future that is not just equitable, but also sustainable. The journalists, initially skeptical, were now scribbling notes furiously, their faces a mix of surprise and admiration. This wasn't just a marketing ploy. It was a mission. This wasn't just about making money. It was about making a difference on a global scale. This was the final, profound turning point, the moment Ronnie moved from beneficiary to innovator, from a story to a legacy. After the gala, Ronnie found Mr. Elias sitting alone in a quiet corner of the hall, a glass of water in his hand. Ronnie pulled up a chair and sat down. "You were brilliant, son," Mr. Elias said, his voice thick with emotion. Ronnie smiled. "I learned from the best." "Thank you, Mr. Elias. Not just for the scholarship or the business or the foundation. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible, for seeing the potential in a barefoot boy and giving him a path to walk." Mr. Elias shook his head slowly. "No, Ronnie. Thank you. I was a man who had lost his way, lost his purpose in a world of numbers and profit margins. You reminded me that a business can have a heart, that a shoe can be more than just a product. It can be hope. You built a legacy that is so much greater than any company I could have ever created." They sat in a comfortable silence. Two men from completely different worlds, their friendship a quiet, powerful testament to a shared journey. The night ended, but the story didn't. In the years that followed, Ronnie led the company with a vision that was both innovative and compassionate. He was no longer a symbol but a leader, and under his guidance, Symphony shoes became synonymous with ethical business practices. The Barefoot to School Foundation continued its work. Its impact felt in every school, every village, every life it touched. Ronnie would often visit his old neighborhood, not with chauffeur-driven car, but on foot. He would walk the streets, now paved and lined with trees, a gentle reminder of how far he'd come. He would watch the children running and playing, their feet safe in their sturdy shoes. And sometimes he would see a child, their shoes worn and tattered, a flicker of his own past in their eyes. He would stop, pull a pair from his bag, and offer it with the same quiet dignity and genuine empathy that had been shown to him so many years ago. It was a gesture that had started with a stranger and a bleeding foot, and had now become an unbreakable promise, a cycle of kindness that would continue for generations, a path that stretched far, far into the future.